The only thing people love more than the Super Bowl halftime show is complaining about the Super Bowl halftime show. But there is one group that easily takes the cake for worst halftime show. A group that performed at 4 separate Super Bowls. And you want to know the most messed up part? We wouldn't have the modern day halftime show without them. First, I need to tell you something truly disturbing. There were people in the 1960s who did not like the Beatles. We think of the 1960s as this decade of massive change, but there were many people at the time who were not happy about racial equality and feminism and even rock and roll. Luckily for them, other musical groups sprung up to push back against this counterculture. These groups made upbeat, wholesome pop music about friendship and love, performed by cheery teens and 20-somethings. Turns out there is a lot of money to be made in giving old people their ideal version of what young people should be. Rolling Stone described this genre as choircore, and one of these groups was Up With People. They were an offspring of moral rearmament, a conservative religious movement created by Frank Buckman. Here's Frank praising Hitler. Up With People toured the US, promoting compassion and unity, performing songs like Freedom Isn't Free and What Color Is God's Skin?
Tell me, Daddy, what color is God's skin?
60FA00. However, many former members would go on to bash UWP for enforcing strict moral codes, pushing propaganda for big businesses and the government, and being connected to a guy who praised Hitler. It's these stories that have led Up With People to be called a cult. I'm putting cult in quotes because I'm referencing past members of the organization, and also because I don't want to get sued. By the way, what is Up With People even about? Most charitable organizations are about something specific, but Up With People is simply about people and bringing people together. A nice sentiment, yeah, it's just surprisingly general. Hey guys, I just started a nonprofit about the importance of oxygen. The question then is, how did Up With People, of all groups, get to play the Super Bowl? Well, they got the gig the same way your least favorite pop star with blue text parents on Wikipedia got their record deal. Connections. UWP's leadership was intimately connected with powerful people all over the world. The executive who effectively ran the big game was on Up With People's board, and NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle was good friends with a father of a UWP member. Up With People made their Super Bowl debut in 1971. However, this wasn't a true Up With People show. It was headlined by the Southeast Missouri State Marching Band, Anita Bryant was a guest, and Up With People were the backing dancers. This is what nearly all halftime shows were up to this point, a basic break from the ball game, usually led by some marching band. This was a mere test run for how high Up With People could go. Their first headlining halftime show was in 1976.
We have hundreds and hundreds of young kids from 40 states and 17 foreign countries presenting for you some of the greatest sounds in American history.
Now, before I start roasting these shows for 10 years straight, I should give UWP some props. On a technical level, their halftime shows are fine. There are no major tech issues, no obscenities, no unscripted moments that get your relatives riled up sharing AI memes on Facebook. I think the most off-color thing UWP do in this show is say damn. However, they commit a far more terrible sin. They are cringe. Imagine this, hundreds of young people with smiles effectively photoshopped on their faces, running around and dancing to hit songs of the 1970s, like Rock Around the Clock and America the Beautiful. I've done lots of work on myself to push past feelings of cringe and establish genuine connection with others, and even still, these shows make me want to die. The theme of this show doesn't help. It's a celebration of America's 200th anniversary.
200 years and just a baby.
America, my favorite 200-year-old baby.
Some folks say we've come a long way. Others say we've got a long way to go. And you know, probably both are right.
In conclusion, America is a land of contrasts. Look, despite all the cringe energy, shows like Up With Peoples were really the only viable option for halftime at this time. In all the footage I've played so far, have you noticed any big video screens? One reason the NFL didn't do shows based on one performer is because the performance needed to be visible in some way from all spots in the stadium. Looking at Bad Bunny up close is great, but try seeing him when you're up in the nosebleeds without any help from a big monitor. That guy could be anybody. He could be Good Rabbit. But once you get past the cringe, there is a crucial change that the group brought to this halftime show. Microphones. Past halftime shows didn't have sound reinforcement, in part because they didn't need it. Marching bands don't need help being loud. But Up With People were the first to weave in actual sound reinforcement across an entire ensemble. Reviews of this halftime show are scarce because people didn't really care about the halftime show like they do now. But from the reviews I could find, people thought this halftime show was fine. Up With People's second halftime show was in 1980, a salute to the big band era. By the way, I feel like I just glossed over that. Halftime shows used to have themes. It wasn't just The Weeknd and his Fun Time Crash Out or the Bruno Mars Beyonce Power Hour with some British guys in the background. We used to get shows with themes like World of Children's Dreams and Blues Brothers Bash. We used to be a proper country. Instead of the schlock of the last show, we've got new hip tunes like Jukebox Saturday Night and It Don't Mean a Thing. Nothing gets the people amped up like a big conga line. See, this is where I wish I could drop all pretense and just yell, "Wait! At my screen, but not only is that crass, but it's inaccurate because there are non-white people in UWP. But it's spiritually white. You know, it's stuff white people like in show form. 1982, Super Bowl 16, Pac-Man's Wedding. But also there was Up With People for their third halftime show. A salute to the 1960s and Motown. That second part might seem incredibly random, but it's because the game was happening near the birthplace of Motown. All right, now we're starting to get some more contemporary songs. You know, relatively. Bro, I'm doing that right now. Calm your We still gotta put up with Michael Row the Boat Ashore and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini.
Has anybody here seen my old friend Abraham?
Oh yeah, he's getting some hot dogs. He'll be back in a sec. But at least this time we got Surfin' USA, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and a whole Beatles medley. It is kind of funny that this group that was created in part as a reaction to bands like the Beatles was covering them just a decade later. But hey, here's another tech milestone, lighting. This was the first UWP show done in an indoor stadium. To make sure people didn't miss out on the great performance, overhead lighting was installed on the ceiling of the Silverdome. Lights back then were high intensity discharge, or HID, and they needed 10 to 20 minutes of rest before turning back on at full power. Sadly, this advancement in tech wasn't enough to save the show. For the first time, the majority of reviews trashed it hard. But Up With People weren't going to be brought down by haters and punk trash. They were looking ahead to the future. The beat of the future. Damn. Up With People's fourth halftime show was in 1986. The theme of the show this year was Beat of the Future, and it was even dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. You can tell because there was a single poster of him placed in the parking lot. Yeah, if they hadn't said anything, I would not have picked up that this show was in honor of MLK Jr. At least Beat of the Future got its own song. Why couldn't Up With People do a song about MLK Jr.? Actually, considering the other songs UWP had, I'm really glad they didn't do that. The show also promoted the Hands Across America event, where thousands would attempt to form a human chain across the country. Now let me ask you something. Who do you think was the celebrity spokesperson for this event? I'll give you a hint. They would have been perfect for something called Hands Across America. Yeah, Bill Cosby. Well, at least a good chunk of songs here are from the decade they're in. Footloose, Power of Love, and my favorite pro-America song, Springsteen's Born in the USA.
Hey bro, I got a gun here. Can you just f***ing shoot me?
I'm sorry, I'm getting so sick of this. Instead of being 1960s cringe, Up With People is now just 1980s cringe. I mean, I saw tons of comments from people being like, oh, these shows are so much better than the slop we get today. But I don't care if it's wardrobe malfunctions or half-hearted SpongeBob tributes or the Black Eyed Peas existing, all of those are better by default than any Up With People show. Reviews were once again unkind, but they weren't coming from just the outside public this time. Following the show, Commissioner Pete Rozelle allegedly told his staff 3 words he never wanted to hear again. Up with people. Their time was up. The NFL learned their lesson quickly, which is why they booked an Elvis impersonator in 1989.
Promise you, you're gonna find this card trick's gonna blow your mind.
However, UWP would do one final NFL performance, the pregame show for the 1991 Super Bowl. At least, that's what I've read, because I combed through all the pregame footage and I could not find them performing. Even Wikipedia is like, yep, they sure did it. Up With People haven't touched the green since 1991. But it wasn't just Up With People that got the boot. The entire concept of a Super Bowl halftime show changed completely in the 1990s. I could say it was due to a variety of cultural and technological shifts, or I could just say Michael Jackson did it in '93 and everyone was like, okay, cool, that's what a halftime show is now. Michael went up on that stage, stood in silence for like 2 minutes, and then proceeded to blow people's minds. Not just through his own showmanship, though. Look at that, MJ's got his own dedicated microphone. There are big video screens to see Michael clearly, dedicated lighting rigs, smoke machines. Even when there's a big display for love and unity for all people, it is simply more effective when MJ does it. You can see how the vibe MJ brought to the halftime show developed over the next decade. By the early 2000s, acts like Up With People were gone, and in their place were rock bands and pop stars. And nowadays, that's what people expect from the halftime show. One central performer, maybe a couple of guests, insane production value, and at least one moment that pisses off a good portion of the US. Could you even imagine what an Up With People halftime show would look like today? It'd be like imagining an episode of Glee in 2026. Look forward to the whitest covers imaginable of The Chainsmokers and Vertical Horizon. Were Up With People secretly good?
No.
But they did help bring in new technology that made the halftime show what it is today. And for that, and only that, none of the alleged cult stuff or the guy praising Hitler stuff, they deserve credit. Let me know in the comments what you think about these Up With People halftime shows. And if you want to learn more about the tech that goes into making shows like this today, check out this video next.